about the best ways to demonstrate compliance, particularly when we're thinking about Martin's Law. But before I go on to the best ways to demonstrate compliance, I'm going to share a photo from last night to show you why we need to demonstrate compliance. So this was an incident last night. Now, I took this photograph as we were leaving a restaurant, well, just before we left a restaurant. The young lady serving us said, "The stairs you came up are blocked because of a police incident. It was a suspected acid attack." And she said this very calmly and very professionally. And I'm already thinking Martin's Law relevance to the nighttime economy. But then she carried on and she said, "There is an alternative way out. I didn't know about it until tonight." And then she carried on and told us that she'd been there for 7 weeks and hadn't had any induction training. So all of this was reinforcing some of the reasons that Martin's Law is really important, because these things, she should have known how to get out of the building, if only for her own safety, let alone that of members of the public. So, one of my key takeaways from today, or one of the things I hope you take on board, is do not wait. The terrorists won't wait. And as you've been hearing today already, not only do many of the requirements already exist in law, but the additional requirements are intended to be proportionate. I know you've heard the word proportionate many times during the course of this morning. Another thing to take away is know your numbers. Now, in terms of numbers, I'm talking about people numbers. Now, as far as this is concerned, the legislation, Terrorism Protection of Premises Bill, is still going through Parliament. A year ago, when I was standing here talking about Martin's Law, we were looking at the standard tier as being 100 people. The current draft has it at 200 people. The enhanced tier is 800. But things have changed. The way in which you calculate the number of people has changed. There is now guidance on that. Before, you were thinking in terms of members of the public in that public space. Now, it includes all people, including staff. And there's guidance on how you can make these calculations. So these calculations could be, as we had somebody from a sporting organisation earlier, it might be that you're using ticketing to manage your registrations. It might be that it's aligned to fire safety, because everybody has to have a fire risk assessment and linked to that. It might be another way. There's actually 6 different ways listed in the guidance. So you need to know what your numbers actually relate to, especially because the legislation could still change. I think you've probably heard the word training come up in just about every session today. That should tell you just how important it is to do the right training. Not only induction training, or general health and safety training, or training on the risks. Don't forget your emergency preparedness training, like first aid, like fire safety, or indeed, as last night highlighted, don't forget to train your staff on the emergency evacuation procedures. It wouldn't have taken much to train that young lady on, that's the emergency exit, this is how to get people out. It wouldn't have taken much, it wouldn't have taken very many minutes, because last night we were safe. Last night she was calmly telling us about an incident, but for her to find out last night as an incident was occurring, that was too late. And there's a need for security training. Now, I know you've heard a little bit already from Ian and Chris on physical security, cyber security. There is talk of additional counter-terrorism training. Now, the draft bill doesn't specifically include it, but I would urge everybody to undertake this training. It's free. It's online. There's Action Counters Terrorism training. It's actually really good. It just helps to improve your own awareness of things to be vigilant for. Now, you've already heard from other speakers about different aspects of security, so I'm going to pick now on health and safety. Organisations that employ over 5 people should already legally be doing these things. Things like a health and safety policy, things like risk assessments. We've already talked about how you should be doing training. And this doesn't need to be burdensome. There is signposting to lots of free, good quality information on sites like the Health and Safety Executive, for instance. Or for organisations that need a little bit more help, in your goodie bags that you've got that you received on registration, you should find that you've got some additional information about a special offer that we're providing in terms of a health and safety package. Now, that health and safety training and consultative approach will be aligned to internationally recognised standards. So some of what I've been talking about would be free. There are some things that people can use information to do themselves or supported. But I would encourage organisations to look at having a structured system that meets internationally recognised standards. Why? Well, yesterday I was delivering a training course and somebody said, is it mandatory? No, it's a voluntary thing. However, we help companies implement lots of ISO systems, normally because of customer demand. The customers want you to have, they want you to demonstrate that you are safe, that you are secure. And so that is why it's good practice. And not only is it a good idea to implement a system that is aligned to a recognised standard, but crucially, again, yesterday I was training somebody who had what I think of as a Mickey Mouse system. It wasn't certified by a UCAS accredited certification body. That meant that the people who were assessing it, they'd written the procedures and then they were marking their own homework. That is not a robust system. People who engage with a UCAS accredited certification body, and it just so happens that we have somebody in the audience that might be able to help with that as well. But independent third-party certification is going to give, it acts as greater credibility and provides greater customer confidence. So why wouldn't you want to make your customers happy, making them feel safe and secure? And what's that going to do for your business? If people feel safe and secure, they're much more likely to go out. And we know that from events like post-Manchester, when people were still reeling in the shock, businesses suffered as well. So commercially, it's a good idea. So mine's probably been the shortest presentation, despite the fact I told you all about last night as well. So are there any questions? So Jane's question was, when you're going for ISO accreditation, is there a standard that you would recommend going for first? And it depends on what the business needs are. Historically, and I'm thinking back probably a couple of decades now, we would probably have seen people starting with ISO 9001 for quality management. But if we're thinking in terms of Martin's Law, I deliberately showed standards that I thought would be more relevant to tackle first. And so in terms of Martin's Law, the 3 that I showed would be particularly relevant. But if you were going to start with just one, then I would, and the reason we're promoting the health and safety is I would suggest ISO 45001. And one of the reasons for that is it builds up that standard requires you to have to do your risk assessments, which you're legally obliged to do anyway. It requires you to identify all of your relevant legislation. So here's a little secret. It's not such a well-guarded secret because in the last 24 years I've shared it with many people. But in 24 years of doing this job, I have never, ever, ever, not once, ever, found a single company that is entirely compliant with their legal requirements until such time as they've actually implemented the system. And that's because if you don't take that step back and understand what legislation applies, how can you possibly demonstrate that you comply with it? If you don't know what the law says, you're not going to stand a chance. So having a structured system gives you that framework and helps you to build on it.